Well, I am so excited to be here, and you guys got me an amazing mood because I just got back from leading a 5 day wellness retreat in Big Sur, California on sacred land, and it was incredible. So I am rejuvenated, my cup is full, and I'm so excited to share with you guys. Um, yay! Um, a little bit about me. I have been um I've been in the field for like 35 years and like Elise said, I'm a board certified art therapist, licensed in multiple different states. I'm going to jump right into why use art as a therapeutic tool? Let me just say that if you're not a trained art therapist, you can't use the term art therapy. So you just have to be careful with that. But you can say, I incorporate art into my practice, or I use creative interventions, however you want to say it. Art therapy is its own thing. And although I do see it on TikTok, people are like, get certified as an arts therapist. And I'm like, so be careful with that. Anyway, why use art in your work? Well, first of all, it's really good for fine motor skills, right? So you're drawing, if you're collaging, if you're cutting. So that's it's really helpful. I do find that it's good for concentration, not just to improve concentration, but as a way to assess how long can my clients concentrate? How long can they stay with this project before they start getting distracted? So it's a really good way early on in therapy to see who you're working with. Um, Problem solving skills. I would clump together problem solving skills and also having choices. Like a lot of our clients come in and they feel like they don't have any choices at all. And just being able to choose a red crayon over an orange crayon, lets them know that there are choices. Problem solving, like if I said to draw a circle, are they going to draw a circle that covers the whole paper or a tiny little circle? If they can't figure something out, will they ask for help? So, one of the things that our adult clients don't love doing is one, not being perfect, and two, they don't like asking for help, right? So, I often tell them, like, we only get good at something if we do it over and over again. And we also want to be able to learn from people who know what they're doing. So, always asking for help and learning, yeah, okay, this is how I would use watercolor paints versus this is how I would use markers and things like that. So different kinds of problem solving. There's tons of research studies that show that artwork, doing something creative, can decrease depression, can decrease anxiety. I have had clients come in and they are so tight, their shoulders are up to their ears and their muscles are tight, and I just have them start maybe just painting stripes back and forth. um, and when you do that, when you're just moving like a crayon or a marker or a paintbrush back and forth, your eyes are going back and forth, and it's very much the same as what you experience with EMDR. So you're crossing over that midline. And so I see people's shoulders drop. I see their breathing slow down. So a lot of, regulating themselves while making the artwork work while getting lost in the process. If you're working in groups, it's a great way to build social skills, looking over and saying, oh, I like the way that person drew that. I want to try that. Or how did you do that? Yeah, I want to incorporate that. Or working together. Sometimes I'll have families come in and I'll have them draw all together on one piece of paper. And you can get a lot of information on that. You could see if they're all drawing on top of each other, or if everybody stays in their own little corner and never interacts with each other. You're going to understand the family dynamics in a very different way than if they just sat and told you. Self-management, I guess that goes hand in hand with the decreased depression, and anxiety, but also like knowing when to stop, knowing when to limit how many materials you're using. Sometimes I mostly work with adults. Well, let me correct that. I only work with adults now, but earlier in my career, I worked a lot with kids. And I'd have kids who come in and they use up all the glue or all the paint. And so helping them to manage, control in that way. Self-esteem can be enhanced where they're doing something like, I can't do this. I can't make this little beaded animal, or I can't make this painting. It's never going to look good. And what I find is that if people give up in the middle of trying, that's the narrative they're going to have. They're going to end up with the narrative of, I'm not good at making art. But if they push themselves through being frustrated, feeling a bit disappointed, and maybe even asking for some guidance, some help. And then they'll get to the other side and they'll be like, oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was. Or actually, that was pretty good. I'm going to send that to my mom, or I'm going to hang them up on the wall. They don't always make artwork that is beautiful, and that's not the point. But getting people past that moment of frustration, and this never stops. I got to say, I've been an artist since I was, I don't know, could hold a crayon. So 3 years old, 2 years old, I don't know. And there is always a moment of panic. Like, for those of you who are artists, you know what I'm talking about, right? There's always a moment of panic while you're making the art. You're like, this sucks. This is terrible. I want to throw it. I'm giving up. But you get past that and you build your self-esteem. You're like, oh, okay, I'm getting better each time. Increasing mental flexibility, like making different choices than you would usually do. I used to work in a a lot of drug treatment clinics, and I'd have people who came straight out of rehab or came straight out of prison, and they're like, how is drawing with crayons going to help me from sticking a needle back in my arm? And I'm like, you know what? You're here because whatever you're doing, however you're doing your life, isn't working. And all I'm asking you to do is try approaching the world in a little different way. And I don't care what you make with your little crayons, but just try it, right? And that's one step towards being a little bit more flexible in your life. Because if I have so many people who come in and be like, I can't draw, I'm not creative, I don't have a creative bone in my body. And I tell them, you don't have to be good, you just have to be willing. You just have to be willing to try something outside of your comfort zone. And really, that's what we're trying to get all of our clients to do, right? Creating new neural pathways, where, let's say we're working with somebody with trauma, with loss, with grief, even with anxiety. If you ask them to talk about their trauma or talk about their last panic attack, they're going to start reacting as if they are reliving that, right? That's PTSD behavior. But if we can get them to paint or draw or collage or work with clay while they're retelling their story of trauma or panic attack or whatever, what you're doing is you're connecting this sense of calm concentration with the trauma. And if you could do that over and over again, you're moving those closer and closer together. And eventually you will help them develop a different emotional response to their trauma. They will recall their trauma connected to something that's soothing. So I just wanted to throw out an ethical consideration that anytime somebody's making art, especially if you're working with kids, don't hang it up on your wall. It's the same, as them telling you something. You wouldn't write down, something that they told you and hang it up on the wall. It's an extension of their personal experience. So we want to give it the same consideration in terms of confidentiality. So I just wanted to put that out there. Also, I don't like hand it over to the parents if it's a kid. I ask the child, would you like to share this art with your parents? And they have the option, yes or no. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some different art exercises that you could do. And I'm going to go through some really, really basic ones. I'm going to go through some more advanced ones. But this is a really nice one for calming down, or even starting. Let's say you're running a group or somebody's coming in and they're all worked up. I will oftentimes have people draw with both hands. At the retreat that I just did, we had big rolls of paper. So I covered the table with these big rolls of paper and I had everybody stand up and I had them doing breathing and drawing. So they were breathing together with the drawing. They were moving their bodies. And sometimes I'd be like, okay, cross over your median line there and come back and go try doing opposites or back and forth or mirroring. And so really just getting them used to making some art. This is a great way to just, without expectations of how it looks, to just get them to jump in. So I like the bilateral drawing. I do recommend, if you're going to do this, tape the paper down, because otherwise it scoots around, because usually we're holding the paper while we're drawing. So just tape it down on the corners. Just a little helpful hint that I've learned by doing it wrong. Right. Another one to reduce expectations or anxiety, perfectionism, is to have people draw with their eyes closed, right? So in this workshop that I did, I had a guy who was probably my age, in his 50s, and he was in the military his whole life, and he had a lot of PTSD, and talked about how he talked about how he was a perfectionist, and he had actually bought a ton of really expensive art materials and never used it because he was worried that he would ruin it. And so the first exercise that I had them do was I asked them to draw a bridge, because they were all going through this transformation, this journey with me. And so a bridge is a great example of, where are you? Where are you here? Where are you going to? You know, but he couldn't get started. He just sat there and stared at the paper. And so I said, you know what? Just close your eyes. Just close your eyes and draw. And and he did. He just closed his eyes and he drew. And he actually made this very cool piece. It looked like this very abstract geometric shapes all over the place. He loved it. He loved it. This guy, by the end of our 5 days together, was crying, was sharing, was drawing, was. When he left, I told him, you know what? There's times in life where we got to close our eyes, and there's times in life where we got to have our eyes open, and you have the wisdom to know the difference. I stole that from AA, but so, you know what I'm talking about. So sometimes just closing your eyes and drawing and just not having expectations, or even saying, I'm going to draw something ugly. So letting go of that perfectionism. Also, in the same kind of realm is a scribble drawing. What I'll do is, I like to do this like maybe in my first session with folks, where I'll give them a piece of paper and I will give myself a piece of paper, and I will just tell them to just make a scribble, and I'll make a scribble. We switch papers, and then I ask them to make it into something. So if you look at this, like the first scribble, Um, I think, yeah, I think the purple scribble was a scribble I made. And then my client made it into the sailboat. And then the orange scribble my client made, and I made it into a pumpkin. And it was like probably October because we're oftentimes influenced by all the stuff going on around me. But this is a fun thing to do. You can do this. I usually do it 3 times in a row with my clients, back and forth. And then what I'll do with them is maybe use it as dropping into their subconscious, like, what do these 3 images tell me about you? Or, you know, are do you see any similarities between them? And so maybe my client is a sailor. Maybe he owns a sailboat, or maybe he just watched a movie that had a sailboat in it, or maybe it has nothing to do with that. I don't know. You know, maybe he listened to a song that had sailing in it. So just, asking them about what they drew. Usually I'll start off with a question like, I usually don't jump into the artwork first. First, I'll ask about the process. I'll say, what was that process like for you? Oh, I was a little intimidated at first, but then, I turned the scribble around all different angles and then I saw the sailboat right away. Or this was a stupid process. I don't know why we're doing it. Everything's going to give you information about the person you're working with. So you usually ask about the process, and then I'll ask them to describe the drawing. And like if you look at the sailboat one, I might say, I see that you put 4 little circle windows in your sailboat. Does 4 have any specific meaning to you? And they'll be like, this is the answer I always get is, um, that's how many that fit. Well, that's how many you made fit, right? Because you could do 2 big ones or 7 small ones, but right. But I'll have them think about it. Does 4 mean anything to you? Were there 4 people in your family of origin? Do you have 4 pets? Did anything significant happen when you were 4 years old or 4 months ago? Or is 4 your favorite number? You just kind of like pick out things, and they might say yes or no, but usually they'll come up with something, some information that they'll give you. I'm not saying like we're reading tarot cards or we're like reading astrological signs. I'm just saying if you ask the right questions, you can get them to start telling you stuff that they may not have shared with you otherwise, right? And so I just want to make the point too that I don't interpret somebody else's artwork. I don't say, oh, I see that the sailboats represent X, Y, and Z. And so that means you are this type of person. I don't do that because a sailboat for me can mean something very different than a sailboat for you or somebody else. And it can mean something different for me today than it did 4 years ago. And so I just ask the questions. And if you visit my website, I have a lot of like things you can download for free, and a lot of times I'll have questions in there. I think one, the typical. There's the draw a tree, draw a house. I have a list of questions that I would ask for those typical things. So anyway, let me pause there for a second and see if anybody has any questions. Okay. Okay. This If you have perfectionists, you can always ask them to paint or draw something ugly. I like to do this. I like to do it on a big piece of paper. So I'll have them either with watercolor paint or acrylic paint. Let me just say something about materials for a second. Um, I don't use oil paint because it's too toxic and too hard to clean up and too expensive. I don't use tempera paint because I hate the smell of it. It's really cheap paint, and usually when it dries, the colors you they dull, and also they oftentimes flake off the paper. So I don't use tempera paint. That's the old paint that we got in elementary school. I do like acrylic paint. It's fairly inexpensive. You can use it straight out of the bottle or you can water it down. So, and it's easy clean up with waters and it's not toxic. Um, Although if you get it on your clothes, it does not come out. So I tell my clients that. I like watercolor paints. That's just been kind of my thing lately is my watercolor paints. I've never taken a watercolor class, but I've just been playing with it and loving it. And they're really easy to travel with, so I throw them in my backpack. Um, so anyway, that's my thought about paints. Um, what I'll do is I'll take a large piece of paper and I'll just ask them to make the ugliest painting they can think of. And then we set it aside, we let it dry. Maybe we talk for a while, or maybe they move on to a different thing. But then I'll once it's dry, I have them come back in and cut it or use those big hole punch or shape punches. And look how cool that is, right? They started off with an ugly painting and then they let it dry, and that's talking about being patient, and then and then gluing it on and making this collage. So I wanted to share with you guys these watercolor circles, and these are it's so simple. And I oftentimes if this is somebody's first time painting or painting with watercolors, I just say paint circles. That's it. I have a ton of videos online that you are welcome to go look at either on TikTok, on Instagram, or on YouTube. So most of my stuff is under Hayes Art Therapy. And so I'm just painting circles in this one. I'm letting the colors kind of bleed together. Um, and so you can see like sometimes I'm like just dropping in some water so it spreads. And sometimes I put colors on top of colors and just let them spread. I love the idea of letting go of control. And everybody can make a circle. It doesn't even have to be a perfect circle, but letting go of the control of everything being perfect and letting the colors bleed together. I'll come back with like a white marker or a black marker, and then I'll just make repeated circles or dots or stripes. And it becomes this really cool image. People love it. And it's also it looks chaotic because it's so fast sped up here. But it's um, it's very repetitive, which can put you into the same brain waves of doing meditation. So anytime you do something very repetitive, you'll calm yourself down.
A fully licensed LPC in order to get certified in art therapy?
Yes and no. So art therapy programs will incorporate both, right? Uh, so if you're doing a full art therapy program, it'll incorporate both so that you can go and get a license to either as an MFT or an LPC or whatever, depending on what state you're in. If you already have a license in something else, and like so social work or LPC or something like that. If you already have a degree in that, then you can get a certification and then you can go on to take the exam to get board certified. So it's kind of a different process. Yeah. And if you have like specific questions about that, you can either look at um, the American Art Therapy Organization, American Art Therapy Association, which is arttherapy.org. Or, you can always reach out to me and I can tell you like specifically we can talk about like what your process would be. Yeah. And George, you had a question?
Yeah, I started doing like my own art, painting, drawing on an iPad on an app called Procreate,
Hmm.
and I'm just
Hmm.
kind of it just struck me. I was wondering, is there a place for like digital art and like Apple Pencil and things like that in this in therapy
Oh,
and
100%, 100%. I've used Procreate, I've used Sketchbook, and then I also use something called Paper by 53 on my iPad. And so, especially when you're working with kids and teens who are so comfortable doing things on a screen, right? Or if you're in an office that can't get messy, it's really convenient. So yeah, I will. What I love about that is they could draw something, some of those have stickers they could put into them,
that's so
and
cool.
yeah, and then you can either take a screenshot or you can download it and you can send it to them. You can
Mhm.
text it to them, you can email it to them, and also you can keep it in their file as,
Mhm.
part of their artwork. So
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. I
It's
think
pretty
it's a great
cool.
one. I, your turn. You guys want to make some art?
Yay. You know I'm horrible.
Yay.
You know I'm horrible, Pam. You know I keep saying I can't draw, but I'll try it.
I can't draw. Okay. That's okay. That's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys to think about something that you're struggling with lately, whether it's anxiety or frustration or exhaustion or anger or depression or loss, whatever it is you're thinking about, whatever it is you're struggling with. And I want you to personify that feeling as a monster. I want you to draw it as a monster. I want you to think about, what color would your monster be? What shape is it? Is it big? Is it small? Is it soft and furry, prickly? Is it slimy? Is it an amorphic shape? Do you want to add claws, antennas, teeth, hair? Totally up to you. And I would say, don't think about it too long. I would say just look at the colors you have in front of you and choose a color and just start drawing. That's what I usually say to people. As you're working, I'll just talk because we have such a short time together. But yeah, continue to work. I just want to let you know this is not something I would do with somebody in the first session where I meet them. I'm uh I'm not that mean. I usually will have them do this in like a third or fourth session. Once I feel like they're comfortable with me, they're also comfortable with the idea of making art with me as a way of expressing themselves. So here's one of those examples where we are focusing on something that's kind of a difficult feeling, yet we're having you draw and concentrate, so we're connecting those two together and changing your emotional response to it. Now, it doesn't happen after just doing it once. You want to, practice that over and over again. So here's some examples of some of my clients' monsters. Everybody has a different looking monster. Does anybody work with eating disorders?
No.
No, okay. I There were several years when I lived in Los Angeles. There were several years where I was working at eating disorder clinics, and what I would find is they'd draw these monsters that were so cute. They were so cute, and they're like, I don't want to get rid of my monster. It's too cute, and they were really protective of it, and um, it became part of who they are. So a question I would ask, and you guys can think about this as you're creating your monster. A question I would ask would be, if you were standing next to your monster, how big would you be compared to it, right? One of the neat things that I do with my clients after they draw their monster, and I would suggest you guys do this later tonight or in the next couple of days is I will have my client, that let's say that I drew my monster red. So I would take, and I'm well, let me finish my thought. I am going to have you have a conversation with your monster. And so the way that I do that is I have you take a regular pen, an adult tool that we use all the time, and put it in your dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, so I put it in my dominant hand. And then I choose a color to represent my monster. So let's say I drew my monster in red. I'm going to put a red pencil or crayon or whatever in my non-dominant hand. And then I'm going to have a conversation with my monster, talking about how, to write at least two pages where you're going back and forth talking to your monster. And then I always ask people to end with the adult rational self with your black pen to say, I hear you, I see you, but you don't get to control me, or I'm in control here, or I get to make the decision, something like that, so that you're integrating the monster, you're hearing it, you're accepting it, maybe you even love it, but it doesn't get to take over. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Does anybody want to share their monster?
I'm done with mine, so I could.
Oh, I'd love to see it. Tell us about it.
Okay. So this is my monster. I don't know if you guys can see that very well,
That's pretty
but
good. Yeah.
that's me at the bottom. So
Mm,
there's a size scale here. It feels
mm,
huge. And I gave it kind of a nondescript face because for me, it takes on the face of whatever it needs to.
mhm.
Recently, I've been dealing with just a lot of anxiety. I have been dealing with some chronic illness recently that has been making me feel really helpless. And
Mhm.
I have been feeling really stretched thin and anxious just about everything. And I'm not someone who has anxiety. So to have this anxiousness be grasping onto me and it feels like it's permeating throughout my body, right? So my
Yes.
anxiety, it's loud, it's yelling, it's there, and it's there. It's just really, it wiggles through my entire body. It makes me feel nauseous. It makes me feel ill. And so I thought about it though. This anxiety is still parts of like me thinking. I'm such a
Hmm.
thinker, right? And so I incorporated flecks of gold throughout my creature before I even
Oh,
realized it.
interesting. Okay.
And my little character, I also drew in gold. And I think I realized as I was drawing it, I was like, I see bits of my anxiety in myself. It's me. It's part of who I am to be someone who's a thinker, be someone who's analyzing things when sometimes maybe I just need to be a feeler and accept that this beast is inside of me.
It's here. It's here. Does it feel different seeing it on the paper than it did thinking about it?
Definitely. After I was done and I looked at it for a few seconds, I was like, this is what's been with me the last like week or two.
Hmm. Hmm.
I love that, Ashi.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. A couple of things that it's because you've put it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, it's contained. It's also you put it outside of you, so you can be a little bit separated from it. And and then the other thing is, it looked like two things to me, and you can just think about this,
Mhm.
but one, it looks like the letter E.
Hmm.
Like hold it back up again.
It
That's
does.
I don't.
Looks like a
Yeah,
blocky letter E.
yeah. It looks like yeah, a bubble letter E. But also, it looked like an intestine, and I thought that right before you said it, you get upset stomach. Yeah.
Hmm.
So sometimes you'll see those things, and you're like, oh, it looks like this to me, but I don't tell you that's what it is. I say that's what it looks like to me. Does that have any meaning to you? So maybe you explore what the letter E is, or something like that. Um, and some of the questions that I would ask my clients about it is describe your monster, like go through colors, what shapes, just like you did. I added gold and things like that. Um, Does it feel different looking at it? I've already said some of these things. How did what was the process like of creating it? Did you feel it anywhere in your body? Um, would you do anything to change it? Would you like to add or remove anything? So those are some of the questions that I might ask. Thank you for
Awesome.
sharing.
Yeah.
Really.
Pam, I have one real quick question, and then Sarah
Hmm.
can go.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful for us, as we're going through this process, and I'm thinking about my monster, and then for our clients to maybe repeat the drawing like in a couple of weeks after we've done some processing to see
Mhm.
if it still takes the same shape, form, what's different about it? Could that mean, and I'm asking you as the professional, could that mean that we're thinking about it differently, if we try to do it again in like a couple of weeks?
Any of these things are going to change over time. If you draw a monster, if you draw a tree, if you draw a bridge, they're going to look different from day to day. And it's really interesting to see the process of that. Another thing you could do in like a couple of weeks is you could say, can you create a space for your monster to be in where it feels more safe? Would it be in a crib or a house or the woods, or something like that?
Got it.
Um,
Yeah.
so, so you could do different things like that.
Sarah,
Or
Sarah had a question. Sorry.
yes, Sarah.
So let me make this thing go away. Let's see. I started out drawing. It was very loud because I struggle with sleep.
Hmm.
And the more I started going, the more it started being more about like overstimulation. Because he's got like itchy bug arms and then he's loud and he smells and won't shut up. And those are all the things that keep me from sleeping is um, being aware of everything in the entire room all at once.
Hmm. Hmm. And so when you're talking to your monster, you might ask, what do you need? What do you need from me? What would make you feel better, right? What would allow you to allow me to sleep? Those kind
I don't
of
know. I feel like
things.
I'd ask it to just could it be anywhere else, just
Can
for a
you go
little
away?
while.
And that's one of those things where like, can you give it an environment where it can like, like you would do with a dog, you put it in a crate so it could
Yeah.
be quiet, yeah, and give it a place that it's safe to set it aside. Yes. All right. I just want to be really conscious of our time. I know Suki had also raised your hand. But if you guys want this, I listed, discussion questions, is it scary? Is it friendly? What can your monster do for you? What does your monster do to you? Those are some questions. I think the rest of them we went over. Yeah. So I can also send you this too. So this is something that I created, I don't know, maybe a year ago that I give to my clients. I call this the self-care rose. You can go to my website and you can download this. So basically, for each thing you do, I have them color it in. You drank water, okay, color that in. You did some journaling, color that in. You did 8,000 steps, color that in. I brushed my teeth. I danced, and then I left some open so people can add to it. And so that's kind of a fun thing. Like the more you've colored in, the more you're giving yourself that self-care on a daily basis. And I just want to let you guys know that I have a new book that came out that yay, it has the monster in it. It has the monster exercise in it, but this is such an interesting thing. It takes CBT and art therapy and puts them together, and it's broken down into 10 different sessions or sections. And it's written for people to do on their own, but also at the end of each chapter, there's a little square for the therapist. If you were using this in your office, here's what you would do. So it's got directions, it's got reasons why, it's got a CBT exercise, an art therapy exercise, all the follow-up questions that you would either have them journal about or you would talk about. So it's really laid out very clearly. So we have a couple minutes left. I know I rushed through that, but questions, comments, words of wisdom.
Can Suki share what she was going to share?
So this is my monster. It's like anger, and I know anger is usually red. I started drawing anger like from started drawing anger
Yes.
out. But my monster is blue. Because there's usually always something underneath anger, like there's like an emotion underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And mine was like heartbreak, so his heart is broken.
Mm-hmm.
And he's crying. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and also like he kind of reminds me of like Where the Wild Things Are, like that book, because that book is very interesting and like near and dear to my heart for me. But like, he was sent to bed without food and he just wasn't listened to and he was silenced. And I feel like my monster is just angry for being silenced. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, yeah.
Then Suki, you definitely have to have the conversation with your monster because to give it a voice, right? You have to let your monster talk. I heard somebody the other day say that they somebody in my group drew a broken heart also, and then they commented that that allows for light and love to come in. It was like an opening for that, and I thought that was really sweet. Yeah.
Thank you, Suki.
Thank you for sharing.
My question kind of aligns with what you were just saying about Suki's comment to
Mhm.
let her monster talk. What if a client is able to consciously depict the monster, but doesn't have a conscious story of the monster?
Something again with the non-dominant hand, you can get the subconscious stuff comes out because you can't control it as much, and they don't have to have a story about it. That's why it doesn't have to be a preconceived story that already exists, but they could draw it and then they can come back to it the next time they meet with you. And maybe you ask one or two questions and the story starts to develop and they start to see uh, what's what's driving the monster, or where it's coming from, or what it needs. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the idea of what you were saying earlier on one of the previous slides of creating um, neural pathways.
Hmm.
I think that's where my question is coming from. Um, while you were doing your presentation, I was like really interested in part of it, like the neural pathways aspect, and knowing that I'm like a narrative person, so narrative does take hold of one part of the brain, one hemisphere, and art, like drawing, takes another part of the hemisphere, brain hemisphere. So putting that together, I think that's what I'm drawing from your presentation, is actually putting
Hmm.
things together and creating these pathways.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, you can take that so much farther. You could keep it on a surface level, but you can take it much deeper. And um, there's no real right or wrong way to do these creative interventions. They're creative. You can be creative with them. You can use them, more intensely, less intensely to sort of um, suit the clients you're working with, right? So maybe I showed you something with crayons and you want to do it with clay. I've had people build their monster out of Play-Doh, so there's different ways to do it. And I think what interests you is what's going to benefit your client the most because you're there with them,
And I
right?
think just based on what Dwayne was saying, because we're narrative in nature, and so um, this would be a really great way to help clients reauthor their stories. So they come in with this version of their stories, and it's not always clear. We help them to kind of figure out, the emerging themes and all of those things, but using maybe your non-dominant hand to really try to understand what this thing is could
Hmm.
be a really good way of trying to reauthor the story without having so much control over the dominant side, right? Like just subconsciously, like, what is it that I'm afraid of? So yeah, I think that'd be a really great way. And yep.
I just wanted to say one other, if you really want to work with the narrative stuff, I've had people create what would the cover of their memoir look like? What would the title of their memoir be if it was based on the story they're living right now? And then what is the memoir or the autobiography that you would like to live, right? And you can do that with drawing, painting. You can do it with collage. It works really well with collage from, magazine pictures and whatnot. So that's kind of an interesting one of like literally changing your narrative.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
For previous clients, I would ask them to tell me if you had to write a book to describe your story, what would the title be? So I'd always start,
Mhm.
and we would fill the pages in as we kind of work together. But this is a great way to do that with art.
If anybody has any questions after today, again, reach out to me. I am here and I'm happy to talk to anybody, mentor anybody.